guys, it's Mrs. Richardson, and this is our next installment of the Flipped Classroom. So today we're talking about the Judicial Branch, and I have up there, you be the judge, because it's all about judges and laws. So let's dive into this. Got a couple questions for you. Do you know, did you know, do you know, when someone is accused of a crime, this type of case is considered criminal or civil? Criminal would be correct. So if you commit a crime, you're going to be tried in a criminal court. How about the court that gets to decide what is constitutional? Does that happen in the Supreme Court or a district court? If you guess Supreme Court, you are correct. Next question. If you break a law of the United States, your case will be held where? Will it be held in a federal court or a state court? Again, federal court is correct, and you are getting these 100%, I bet. All about the robes. Don't the judges look cool in their black robes? Don't you want to grow up to be a judge someday so you can wear that cool black robe? But it's a little bit more than just about the black robes and a whole lot of school that you got to go to. The Constitution created the Supreme Court, the highest court in the nation, and it's really the only court system that the Constitution specifically talks about. The judicial branch is talked about in the third article of the Constitution, and that's where we can find the powers and the job of the Supreme Court. We have other court systems, lower courts called federal courts, and these are created because the Constitution gives Congress the power to create these lower courts or federal courts. Now, we do have a two-court system. So remember, we have federal and we have state. And so just like we have federal laws and state laws, we have federal court system, and that deals with the disputes about laws that apply to the entire United States. And then we have state courts that deal with disputes with state laws. And each state has its own court system that's created by state constitutions. So in Missouri, we have federal courts, which we have a federal court building, which is in downtown St. Louis, right by Busch Stadium. It's that big, tall building and has a dome on the top. Not the old courthouse, but there's a new federal building, the Thomas Eagleton Courthouse. And then there's also another federal building, federal courthouse in Kansas City. And then we have our own state courts, and you hear a lot about state court cases and cases that happen in Missouri all the time. So we do have both things happening in Missouri. Luckily, both of the court systems work basically the same. So I'm going to lead you through the federal court system, and it's pretty much the same for the state court system. Oh, there's Judge Judy. So we're going to talk about criminal versus civil law. Criminal cases usually involve a person who has committed a crime. That's why they're called criminal, because they're criminals. So a person is convicted of or committed a crime, and they go through trial, and if they are found guilty, well, it's some slammer time for them. Civil courts, though, sometimes people disagree with each other and they can't come to an agreement, so they will file a lawsuit, and that's a civil court system or civil court case. And those are to settle disputes between people by deciding which version of the story is correct. So Judge Judy, if you're a fan of Judge Judy, which I am not, anyway, did you know that she's the highest paid person on TV? She makes like $40 million a year for Judge Judy. Unbelievable. Anyway, getting back to civil cases. So in a civil case, that's where it's decided if somebody's going to lose the case. Maybe they're going to have to pay a penalty. Maybe they'll pay a lot of money to the other person. Moving on. It all starts with a court trial, and I'll put this little picture up first. And if we work from the bottom up, let me get my little cursor right here. It starts with the trial court. So this is the first time that the courts actually hear the case, and it happens at a local level or state level, and they decide who is right, if the person is guilty or not. Now, if there is a decision and someone is convicted of a crime, but they don't believe that they got a fair trial, they can take it to the next level. It's called the Court of Appeals. They review the trial court decision to see if there were any errors in the decision, and if they decide that there was an error or they did not receive a fair trial, it goes back to the trial court. If not, if the Court of Appeals looks at everything and says no, everything the trial was handed out perfectly, then that decision has to be followed by all people. So it kind of sits. Then, if after the case has been decided by the Court of Appeals, the losing side may take their case to the Supreme Court level. This is the final level in the United States. It is the highest level of the Court of the United States. The review of the appeal court decides there was an error. Decisions well, I just had a brain fart there, and that's why I paused a little bit. I am trying to go a little bit slower, so hopefully this is a little bit better. Anyway, getting back to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court doesn't actually hold a court trial. What the judges do is they listen to um, the lawyers, and then they take into consideration and make a final ruling. And whatever the Supreme Court rules, there's no other recourse. The Supreme Court rules, and has the final decision. So let's talk about the Supreme Court. What's up with the Supreme Court? Like I said, it's considered the highest court in the United States. It consists of 9 justices, one being the Chief Justice. So there's 8 justices and 1 Chief Justice, and that Chief Justice sometimes serves as a tiebreaker, but is kind of ahead of the whole court. These men and women are appointed by the president, and then they are approved by the Senate. Kind of that checks and balances, and approved by the Senate was one of the things we talked about in class as being a special job of the Senate. These Supreme Court judges and some other federal judges may serve for life. Now, this isn't like a life sentence, but they get to serve until they either retire, or maybe they become sick and they no longer can serve, or, and I don't think this has ever happened, as long as they're being good and they haven't committed any crimes. Everybody's human, so I guess maybe the judges could possibly do something wrong, but these people are pretty serious, take their job serious. It is an honor, high honor, to be a Supreme Court judge. Their major job, the major job of the Supreme Court, the major job of the Judicial Branch, I'm going to put this next one up, is basically to interpret the U.S. Constitution. But I put up there judicial review, and this is a term that I'd like you to know. It means that the courts decide arguments about the meanings of law, how they are applied, and whether or not they violate the Constitution. So the courts, the Supreme Court especially, looks at these court cases, really examines the Constitution, and makes sure that these laws are constitutional. So about a year, I guess, but maybe a little, was it last spring? Maybe last spring. I'm mumbling right now. Anyway, the whole Affordable Health Care Act was a lawsuit. There were several people that brought a lawsuit against the Affordable Health Care Act, and basically Barack Obama, saying that it was unconstitutional, that the Congress did not have the power to enact this law. And the Supreme Court ruled, I guess it was back in 2012. Anyway, the Supreme Court ruled that yes, Congress did have the power to enact the Affordable Care Act under something called the Necessary and Proper Clause, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in class. So once the Supreme Court ruled that the Congress did have the power to make this Affordable Health Care Act, it would stay in effect or until it may get changed by Congress. So that's it. That was pretty quick and easy about the judiciary branch. Hope that you didn't have too much problems with this, and I will see you guys tomorrow.